Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the vlog. Today I wanted to do a little bit of a breakdown about goal setting. This has been a viewer requested one, so shout out to Stephen who suggested this topic. It's just something that I'm gonna talk a little bit about in two halves essentially here, right? I'm going to talk about how my journey with goal setting has been in Jiu Jitsu, and then I'm going to talk about SMART goals, okay? Which is an acronym that I'll do a little bit of describing about. So that's kind of the way that I'll split this video. Second half will be talking a little bit more broad strokes about how you can start to set some practical goals for yourself. And the first half will be my kind of experience. So, yeah. Goal setting, I think it's something that we don't interact with that often in like our everyday lives. Because essentially, I think we haven't really made a habit out of it. Okay, that could be one reason. I think another reason is that it's not very widely encouraged. Most people's experience or interactions with goal setting is something like a New Year's resolution. And, people get to the end of the year or the start of a new year and they're like, you know what, I'm going to do this and, I'm going to start this or I'm going to achieve this. And because they're not in the practice of doing it often, this is something that fades very quickly, right? The motivation for those resolutions fades. People just don't want to put the effort in, don't know how to put the effort in. So I feel like if that is people's only interaction with goal setting, then yeah, of course you're not going to set good goals. You're not going to meet those goals and you're not going to feel success. In an education context, obviously being a teacher, this is one that I've been in for, over a decade now. Getting students to set goals is something that I often do. And it's not something that we just do at the start of the year. This is something that we do continuously throughout the year, right? We have a lot of conversations about, well, what do you want to do in the future? Now that is what we would consider a long-term goal. After you leave school, what do you plan to do? What do you want to achieve while you're at school? Now this could be a midterm goal, right? So in the next 3 years, what do you want to do? And then what do you want to achieve this term or this year? This could be considered a short-term goal. So I feel like having those conversations with students, firstly, gets them thinking about it. And, no surprise here, but a lot of students have never thought about that before. I go, well, have you thought about what you want to do in the future? And even some of my brightest kids, they would go, I don't know, they haven't had that conversation. Of course, there's some who go, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. And I'm like, okay, well, is that what you really want to do? Or is that what your parents have been coaching you to, to do? Or is it because they are? Some students, especially those less advantaged students or students with learning difficulties or whatever the case are, their goal might literally just be like, I just need to survive high school. Like, all of this is too much. So, goals can vary wildly. There's no right or wrong goals here, but making sure that you can achieve them is an important thing that we're going to talk about, because there's no point me going, oh, well, I want to set this goal to be an A+ student when I'm barely a C student. And we'll talk about the interaction with these goals and how achieving them and finding success actually creates momentum in the second half. In terms of Jiu Jitsu, which I guess is the other context, the other circle in which I live within, goal setting is not that often talked about. It's something that, people express desires for a goal, but I think that they're often uninformed or they haven't been structured in a way by a coach or by the person to actually be that achievable. So an example of this could be something like, oh, well, I have a goal to be a gi world champion. This was not a personal goal of mine, but, I have seen people who go, oh, you know what, I want to be a world champion, right? And that's well and fine to set as a goal, but it's very result oriented. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it reduces the margins for success to a very funneled point, and that can be very dangerous for your goal setting. I remember when I first started competing, actually the first ever competition that I did, I had no idea how jiu-jitsu competitions worked or anything. So when my coaches encouraged members of the gym to sign up for this comp, I was like, oh, I didn't even know competition was a thing, but I'll give it a go. And I didn't really set any goals around it other than, man, I'm not in good shape here and this competition's 12 weeks away. I got a lot of work to do. So I just kind of engaged with the strength and conditioning and the training that was required to find success in a competition. And I trusted my coaches to handle that process. So for me, that was a subconscious thing. I flopped in the gi. I think I lost in my first match in the gi, so I was eliminated. But in the no gi, I won one match and lost one match, which gave me a bronze medal, which I was super stoked on. I was like, wow, okay, this is cool. And I think I'd never really thought about the outcome leading up to the tournament. And I think that that was an important thing because the goal was just to compete itself. So that was my first ever experience, but that in itself was a very subconscious practice. So in a way, I don't know, I can't really say that I learned much about goal setting from that. However, I think the first time I experienced a good goal setting practice was for my first tournament out of the South Island. So obviously I was still based in Christchurch, in New Zealand, South Island. And there was a competition in Auckland, and I was like, okay, cool. Well, we're locked in. We're going to do it. And my coach at the time said to me, I want you to take a piece of paper and a pen, and I want you to write down 3 things that you want to achieve in this tournament that have nothing to do with winning a medal or even winning a match. And at first I was like, okay, cool. I thought we're going to win. And he's like, yeah, obviously we're going to win, but like that's separate to us having process and collecting data. So I want you to write down things like, I want to get to X position. I want to achieve Y submission, or I want to work for Y submission, or whatever the case was. I can't remember now what the things were that I wrote down. But yeah, I wrote down 3 things like, I want to, I think I said I wanted to pass a guard. I think I said I wanted like to try a foot lock, and I think I said I wanted to get to the back. I remember achieving 2 out of the 3. That's something that I do remember. And I think the footlock one was one that I didn't achieve. I think I got the back and I think I passed the guard. So that was like good outcome. I didn't even medal in that tournament and it didn't matter. And I came back to training and my coach said, okay, well, what were the 3 things you wrote down and how did you go? And I was like, oh, well, I got 2 out of 3. And he's like, well, that's really good. He didn't ask me if I'd won a match. He didn't ask me if I'd medaled or anything like that. And it was all process oriented. And that is something that I encourage all of my training partners or my students to do now, is write down 3 things that have nothing to do with the result and physically write them down, because as soon as you put them on your phone or you keep them in your head, we experience something called shifting goalpost syndrome. And like, if you say in your head, oh, these are the 3 things I want to achieve, and then you don't do those things, now they suddenly change, or you give yourself these subconscious excuses and it's like, oh, well, actually, I was trying to pass the guard, so that counts. No, it doesn't count. And now you're messing with the data. Now you're messing with what you're going to be able to take back and work in training. So physically write them down, because the practice of writing in itself is good. That was something for my students at school that I would talk about. Actually, physically writing by hand is a good thing to practice. But also, like, when you put them physically down on the page, there's an interaction with your brain and the world. And you now don't just have it held somewhere private. It is there. It's physical. And it has a different way of imprinting on your brain. We won't go into that now, but that's a very real thing. So, I think as my jiu-jitsu journey has gone on, those goals have changed for me, and I've thought about that interaction often and the relationships between the goals I set and the success that I've found. Often on a weekly basis, I'll be watching footage, like I'll watch competition footage, or I'll be thinking about a certain piece of technique, and my goal will be to go and hit that in training. Or if I'm coaching or instructing a class and I'm showing the move, immediately my goal is to now go and do that technique to the person to demonstrate that it works. I try to encourage students to think about it this way, and that can be done on a session by session basis, a week by week, a month by month, or year by year. So if a student goes to me, hey, I want to get, and hell, I had to do this as well, so I'll use my own example. There was a stage where I was terrible at taking the back. I had no pathways to taking the back, and when I got there, I sucked at like keeping the position and completing submissions from there. I was atrocious. So I said to myself, well, okay, this is obviously a big hole in your game. So I want you to spend the next 6 weeks where the only place that you can submit a person from is the back. And I took 6 weeks where every day I had to achieve back control in training in every round, and find ways to do that. And just that like conscious process of doing that made me think about it more. It now informed my training. It informed what I was researching and looking at, and then what I would be doing differently when I failed at that kind of loop. And that really helped me in my training a lot. I was very mid at the back. Like I literally sucked at it. I could not keep a person there. I could not hold a person there. And now I would say it's one of my better positions. So that kind of taking a block of training and prioritizing something can be really, really important for your game. In the jiu-jitsu context, I mean, you can take that into the work context, you can take that into the professional world, your relationships or whatever. I mean, all of these things apply across the board. Yes, it applies to jiu-jitsu, but you could do this anywhere. Now, with that said, let's talk in the more broader strokes about how you can set these kind of goals, okay? I've already talked about what some of them have been, but we need to think about how to do this in a good way. So we're going to use the acronym of SMART goal setting, okay? Some of you might have heard of this before. If you haven't, SMART. Specific, measurable, accurate, realistic, and time, okay? Or like time oriented. So for a goal to be a SMART goal, and for you to set SMART goals, it has to be specific. Okay, so narrow enough that we can achieve something, but broad enough that it's relative to us. So an example of a specific goal would be something like I would relate it for me to ADCC, because that's what I compete, like that's the competition that I'm aiming towards. So I'm not going to go set a goal around IBJJF because I'm not competing in that. So it's not specific to me. And yeah, so you have to make them kind of catered to yourself and the thing that you're doing. If I was doing this with students and a student said to me, oh, I want excellence endorsement. Okay, well, that's quite broad, maybe a bit too broad. So like excellence endorsement is like an A+ across the board for all your subjects. Might be a bit too broad to start out. I might say, okay, well, why don't we go, let's get it in this subject. I want excellence endorsement in English. Now that's a bit more specific, and it gives us something targeted to work towards. When it's that broad at the top, it might be that it is too much too soon, and you might not be able to achieve it. Smart goal setting is all about achievement, right? Like, setting these things out in a way that we can set ourselves up for success and then steamroll and snowball into bigger goals. Measurable, okay? So it must be something where I can go, I was here and now I'm here. And this is why New Year's resolutions don't work, because a person usually goes, I want to get fitter this year. Fitter than what? Fitter than last year? Fitter than the last 2 years? Do you want to lose X amount of weight or put on X amount of mass? It's not measurable enough, okay? So I might go, okay, well, I want to grow my social media following from 4,000 to 5,000, or I want to get more private classes with people. So I have 5 right now, I want to get to 10. You need to have benchmarks. You have to have these checkpoints where you can go from one to the other, because if you've got nothing to measure by, you're not going to find the success. You're not going to go, hey, well, where did I get to? What's the progress I made? Achievable. Sorry, it's not accurate. It's achievable. Okay, so can it actually be done? Am I going, well, I want to be the first man on Mars, and I've never built a rocket before, and I've got no qualifications in that field. It's not really achievable. Okay, I want to make $1 million, but I haven't made $10,000 yet. Okay, we got a lot of work to do. So achievable means it's got to be like, it's got to be within stages that you can reach. Okay, I'm not going to sit here and say like you have to kind of cut yourself short. You should have some ambitious goals, but you need to know how you're going to get there, right? There's no point me saying I'm going to be a gi world champion and I'm terrible in the gi, or like I'm going to be an ADCC world champion, but I barely train no gi, or I don't wrestle. It's probably not achievable. So then we've got realistic. Okay. It's kind of the same as achievable. Okay. Achievable talks about like, how many of those rungs are you able to climb? Realistic is more like, is it going to be is it within your capacity within these relative things that you've set? So, if I've got a student who isn't sitting English at the moment, like they're not doing English as a course, but they want excellence, they want that A+ grade before the end of the year, that's not necessarily achievable, and it's also not realistic. So that's 2 criteria there where it's not going to work. So I would say we're not going to set that, okay? And then we've got time-based. Now, that's important for us to set, because you have to give yourself a window of time to do this in. It can't just be extended out, and it can't be too short either, right? So when we're talking time-based, I might go, okay, well, I want to, before the end of the year, have competed in X amount of tournaments. That's a good goal to set, okay? However, I need to check it against everything else, okay? Last year, if I want it to be measurable, I might say last year I did 5 tournaments. This year I want to do 6 tournaments, okay? Because I want to get more matches in, so that's achievable, okay? And it's realistic, okay? And it's specific enough, okay? So that's a good goal to set. But if I want to get my black belt before I'm 30, okay? That's great if it's realistic and achievable, okay? I mean, these days you probably buy a black belt, so I guess that doesn't matter. But I know that's a good example of a goal that I set for myself when I was in my 20s. And that's not a goal I would recommend for people to set, because even though it might be time achievable, like, it might not be realistic, it might not be measurable, because, you know, the black belt, at least in more recent times, meant like, hey, you have to be of X skill level, and you have to be able to, you know, demonstrate a whole bunch of skills everywhere and things like that. So I started in my early 20s, actually. Sorry, not my late 20s. I was like 23 when I started Jiu Jitsu. So probably to say, hey, I'm going to get my black belt before I'm 30, it was probably a little bit unrealistic. So I actually ended up getting it when I was 31. But it wasn't because, oh, I'm 31, therefore I've got my black belt. It's because of all the work that we put in, you know, like I was traveling internationally to compete, you know, I was seeking out, the best coaches and the best training, and you know, competing regularly and building my skills. So it wasn't because, oh, I'm X age and I've just been on the mats for this long, I should get this belt. And I knew that. And so when I didn't get it when I turned 30 immediately like that, I was like, yeah, that wasn't a realistic goal to be setting. Okay, so when we set these SMART goals, you need to make sure that you have some kind of process where you write these things down. I talk often about this because I think when you put things down on paper, you suddenly get an objective reflection about how statements in your mind look. Whereas when we don't, and we just keep them in our head, your internal narrative is an echo chamber on itself, and you're very susceptible to biases and things that we've talked about before. So you have to externalize them in a way of checking yourself. Hopefully you've got a coach or, you know, friends or partners or training partners you can talk about this with, and they can check that for you. But you also need to understand that sometimes they don't want to disappoint you, and they don't want to say, hey, that's actually probably not a good goal for you to set, man. Like, and you know, I've had to have those hard conversations with people. You know, I've had students who've come to me and they've said, I want to achieve these grades, and I was like, you need to just come to school first, my guy. And then, you know, I've had students on the jiu-jitsu mat, which were the same, you know, and they were like, oh, I want to win, I want to compete in this tournament. And I was like, bro, you just need to focus on actually getting to class. So, and having those conversations as a teacher and as a facilitator of learning is a very challenging thing, and probably something for a whole different discussion, you know, like the skills to actually manage those conversations with people and to be a good coach are things that we could talk about in a completely different context. So don't worry about that. When you, as an individual, are setting goals for yourself, you just need to think about these criteria. You know, is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? Is it relevant or realistic? I keep getting those mixed up. And time based. You can achieve a lot by setting those goals for yourself. I was fortunate that I kind of learned that skill early on. I still rely on it a lot because I need things to work towards as a human being. When I don't have goals and when I'm idle, I end up tending towards habits that are not very healthy for me. And my default is not a good and healthy one. So when I have goals like, hey, I have agreed to a super fight against X person for X date, now I've got something that I need to work towards, and my goal should be, I am going to win this fight, okay? So I go through the whole process. Beyond winning, how are we going to win? Okay, well, I'm going to set myself 3 things that I know are going to help me win. What am I good at? Okay, all right, I've got this skill, and this skill. All right, well, we need to find fucking ways to make those skills come out in this competition, in this match. So I'm going to go about setting goals that reflect that in my training. I'm going to do positional rounds. I'm going to do X scenarios. I'm going to do this and this. So I'll use my recent match as an example. You know, with who's next, with who's next grappling in Brisbane. So I met with the organizer in July or June at the Giles Trials. We got to talking, and then after that, I was like, "Hey, bro, yeah, I'm down for a match, bro. Let's get it signed." And so Peter Campbell and I, I signed the contract, and once you sign a contract, I consider that like you're locked in. There's no pulling out, right? Like, you've signed up. If you want to be treated like a pro, you got to act like a pro. So I'm like, okay, cool. Right, match is on. Here's my opponent. All right, let's research. Let's think about what he does well, and let's think about what we do well. Okay, now these are the things that he does well. What can I do well to exploit? Okay. Well, where are my weaknesses? Okay, here's my weakness, here's my strength. All right, let's structure training around working to my strengths and filling up the holes in these weaknesses that I have. So, I'd structure a lot of rounds. I'd ask my coaches to go, hey, can we do this? Can we do this? I'm obviously not taking over the class. That's not my place. There are other people who need to get training in. So I am also going in in a polite way, hey, this is going to be good for you because you're going to get a dominant position on me, and this is going to be good for me because I need to work from here. So we're both going to get skills. So we'd structure a lot of those kinds of things. You can call it ecological if you want to, or you could just call it training. And so, yeah, we would set up scenarios. Hey, you're down fucking 2 points, or you've got a guy on your back, or you've got a guy who's mounted you. Let's get out of here. Don't accept positions. Work towards the submission, dominance, control, all of these things, because I know the rule set that I'm going to compete in. I know the guy I'm competing against, and you have to try and coalesce all these things together to peak for a tournament. That's what they talk about, or for a super fight. So, look, I don't think I've ever had a training camp be without its obstacles. Like as I spoke about before with this one, I had strep. And, that does mess with certain things. Like now I have to shift the goalposts in some way where it's like, okay, well, I still need to prepare for this tournament. I can't pull out. I'm not pulling out. What can I do? How can I work around this? Where do I have to be smarter with my goals for each training sessions and things like that. So those interactions can be towards a specific thing like that, or, if you're not a competitor, this still goes for you as well. You could start going, well, I just want to be a tougher training partner for the competitors in the room, or like, I want to be the best hobbyist, like I want to be a guy who's on the mats and can give anyone a hard time and my skills stand up anywhere. That's a great goal, and I know a lot of my best training partners are those kind of people. However, when we do that, once again, that statement needs to fit into our SMART criteria. So I might still go through these same processes. Okay, well, I'm going to spend 6 weeks or 6 months working on my leg locks or my back attacks or my triangles. If you do that, you will accelerate extremely quickly relative to people who are not coming in with goals and structure in their training. So, I don't know how much more I can really add to that. I hope you find this helpful. Thank you, Stephen, from Motion Physio, for suggesting this topic. I hope this is helpful for you, mate. And I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one, guys, and we'll catch you later. Like, subscribe, and all of that shit. Okay.